Another episode of Relational Leadership. We're excited to share with you. We always try to bring you some tidbits of knowledge that we have gained and try to share it with you so that you can use it in your everyday life. I am Stephanie Clements.
And I am Shawn Dawley. And Stephanie, today we are going to be talking about quality connections. So, as professionals and even in our personal capacities, we have these overlapping ecosystems of people in our lives. And especially as we get older, 30, 35,
Right.
you end up just through the momentum of your profession aggregating these large volumes of acquaintances, but it's sometimes difficult to discern, well, which ones are the places where I'm spending time versus who are the people in whom I am investing time. And that could be a fine line to figure out sometimes.
Well, the old adage says it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Amen.
And I go along with that mostly, but it's important that when you know the right people, you better also know what you're doing.
That's true. No, you're right. You're right.
Because you need to have both.
Yeah.
But if you are, whether you are starting your career or you are just looking to advance, or maybe you're just trying to get the right clients and customers, it's finding the decision makers, which are not always easy.
Yeah.
And so when you can find somebody who can help introduce you to those people, that's who is going to advance you further than just, your next door neighbor who may be, stay at home mom or whatever. Doesn't mean that's not a quality connection, but it's not going to help us reach a goal. So, it just depends fully on what your goal is, and then finding the right people to help you get there.
Yeah. Some professions require you to network and network and network and network. And then I came out of a tribe where most of my relationships were sort of formulaically baked in, right? Just the nature of what I did in my previous leadership roles was such that the work itself would put me in the presence of the people with whom I needed to have a relationship. But then, flip the script, and I'm now doing what I do, and I have to do a lot more networking. And I eventually figured out that if I go to, let's say, a social or some networking function, it's wonderful if I can make a contact, but there's so much more value when I make a connection to a connector, right? So somebody who in and of themselves might be a great person to know, but can open the door for so many other relationships. And it might be those second and third order relationships that ultimately bear the fruit.
Right. So, want to talk to you about how you make those, what you can do to get in front of the decision makers, again, for whatever purpose or goal you have. Networking really is key, but it's not just networking to network. I started when I moved to Louisville. I ended up taking a job that had me in credit card processing sales, and it was cold calling door to door small businesses. Awful. I hated it. But a lot of times I would go in there. The decision maker wasn't there.
Yeah.
I'm leaving a message, I'm leaving a card, whatever, they're not calling me back. So how do I get in front of them? And, I myself then decided, okay, I can network easier than I can cold call.
Yeah.
And it was still uncomfortable for me at the time. I had never had to do that before, but I joined the, a business alliance and then some of the chambers where that is going to put you in front of several business owners.
Right.
And I found very quickly, there were pods of people that every time you went, they were together.
Yeah.
And so it becomes very comfortable to walk into a networking event, see somebody and it's easier just to walk over and hang out there, but that's not advancing your goal. And all of a sudden now it's just a social event.
And you are describing not my first, but probably my second, third, fourth, and fifth networking experience. Because the first one I'm going in cold and I don't know anybody, right? And I could hear, the echoes of my mom telling me when I'm 5, right? Just go on the playground and make some friends, right? So I'm doing what I can, to make some connections. But then, as the introvert that I am, that we've talked about previously, once I have now a friendly face,
Right.
Absolutely, that's the first person I gravitate towards at that second, third, fourth, and fifth. And after a while, I realized, wait a minute, what have I done in the preceding 90 minutes as this networking function is coming to a close that has actually, to use your word, advanced my business? And I realized I can't say nothing because, I'm at least developing a relationship.
Sure.
But is it possible, given that there's 150 people here, that there might have been somebody in the room that it would have been more beneficial to spend some time with? So I've got a couple of thoughts on that, but I am still a networking novice. So I'd be curious to kind of get some of your expertise on, as a professional connector, how is it that you are able to maximize those times where you go into those audiences?
Well, so some of the things that I did in the beginning, because I knew I didn't know anybody, I was new to the city also. And so everybody was new to me, is I would go in with the intention of speaking to 5 new people.
Okay.
So that at least I got that in, and then I could talk to some of the people I'd seen previously. Obviously you don't want to shun those. I'm trying to make relationships, but I needed to at least speak and have good conversation with at least 5 new people. The other thing that I would ask for, if it was somebody that I'm talking to that maybe is in sales, but not able to, not going to help my business in that sense, is, do you know anybody here who, owns a restaurant or something like that? And it's really important to be specific, because if you say, do you know anybody here who's a business owner, they're going to scan and, and then they're trying to remember what is everybody's role and whatever. But if you say, I'm really trying to get into the restaurant industry, is there anybody here that that owns a restaurant?
Yeah.
And then they go, oh yeah, I know so-and-so. And then they take you and introduce you. So when you go to these networking events, it's really important to be intentional.
Yes. And so what I hate about what you just said is that you didn't say it to me 9 months ago, right? Because I eventually, like most things I learn in life, I stumble my way through it in the dark. And one thing that I eventually had the aha moment was, okay, the host may not know the resume of everybody in the room, but by definition, if I'm a guest and they're the host, there is a built-in reason for us to talk. And so if I don't know them yet, because it was all done via email or I registered on a website, I'll introduce myself. And that person is probably armed with great intel, to borrow military vernacular, about who might be somebody good. So if they understand what it is I do, and more importantly, who could benefit from it, I'll just simply ask now, like, hey, is there anybody here, based on what you know about what it is that I do, that would be somebody good to introduce me to? And there's never been a time they didn't say yes. Now it might be one person,
right?
It might be 5 people, but I figured out that rather than exchanging business cards, sort of like at random, like throwing a dart at a wall, instead, let somebody who actually knows these people tell me where I should focus some effort.
And that person may also then be able to introduce you as you start talking.
Yeah, that's right.
So just keeping it going. So if you're going to stay for the whole time and it's 90 minutes or 2 hours, take that first 45 minutes and be really, really intentional. Make contacts that you can follow up with. This is not the time to sell your product.
Right.
This is the time to make a connection with the person that you want to sell yourself to.
Yeah.
And so,
that's right.
That nobody wants to go and feel like they're just getting 20 business pitches.
Right. That's right. Very well said, as always. And one thing, the flip side of all of that is the first handful of networking events I went to, I was leaving with like 4 or 5 people that wanted to have a one-on-one with me. Like, oh my gosh, I'm thinking, well, this is too easy. I can't believe how. Well, then when we meet at a coffee shop, it's basically them trying to sell me their product, right?
Sure.
And I understand that, we're all there. It's called network,
Sure.
right? It's not called net drink, despite different people's, approaches. But I will probably not be able to recover from what is basically an underhanded attempt to pitch me their product.
Right.
If they say, let's get together, I want to learn more about what you do. And within the first 5 minutes, I realized you're trying to sell me life insurance. You know what I mean? Like from that point forward, the well's been poisoned. And even if it's a terrific product, at the end of the day, in such a service-oriented economy, before you buy what somebody is selling, you're really kind of buying them.
Mm-hmm.
And if the basis of your relationship is essentially low-level deceit, it's hard to recover from.
It is. And, when you set up meetings like that, you should really go into it yes, I want to learn about you. How can I help you?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you do that, you are going to create a relationship that, I didn't ask you for anything. And maybe you're bringing somebody even to the meeting that's going to help that person. And when you do that, then you establish that, again, that relationship, that credibility,
Mm-hmm.
and then your product. Now I feel like, well, they helped me. How can I help? How can I help you?
Sure. Yeah.
And, one of the things I did early on is, and many people I know have been in it as you have, is a BNI.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so they encourage you to have one-to-ones.
Right.
And I stay super busy. I'm on the run. So whenever I leave somewhere, I may not remember everything at that point that my task
Mm-hmm.
of things to do for that person.
Mm-hmm.
So I would immediately, when I'd ask, what kind of people do you need to be introduced to?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of things do you need? I would stop and send a text or make a phone call right then and say, hey, I'm with a friend. I think that you should meet. I think that y'all would do well together,
Mm-hmm.
and go ahead and do that.
Okay.
And they saw that I was working for them right then.
Yeah.
And so there was no, I wonder if she's going to follow through or anything like that. But those things, but I always like to meet with somebody that I'm going to do that. I want to know the person I'm going to refer.
Yeah.
And make sure that I'm going to make them a quality connection
Mm-hmm.
On both sides.
Yeah.
Because the last thing I want to do is tarnish my own reputation of handing off that life insurance guy that is calling everybody and handed him off.
Yeah. So I am not going to mention his name, but at the conclusion of this, I'm going to text him so he can watch this, because he'll know the story I'm about to tell. This guy, career bachelor, he asked me once, like, hey, do you know any, like, you have any cousins or like, women in your life you can hook me up with, like to date? And I said, fill in the name blank. There's really nobody close to me that I really like that I would want you dating.
Yeah.
And now that obviously landed a certain way, but he and I had a relationship, and he had a pretty stoic disposition. He's like, no, hey, my big thing in life is to kind of know where I stand with people. So, and we're really good friends.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I can, love somebody as a person, but think I can't do business with them, or I can't, again, wouldn't set them up with,
and this one thing, if you roll the dice on somebody professionally and you have a bad experience, you chalk that up to lesson learned. But boy, oh boy, when you invite somebody into the life of somebody and then they get burned, so to speak, I know for me, that'll really wear on me.
Right.
And some of the things that you're talking about, like whether it's financial advice, legal advice, even something like, mold mitigation. Something dealing with the safety, boy, oh boy, you do not want to get that wrong.
Correct.
Especially for somebody close to you, right? So it really does require that degree of trust and establishing their credibility before you can just start throwing them to friends and family as referrals.
So no, that's very important. So another way that you can work, and it's still, again, networking, but you can network yourself to death. You can spend all your time networking and not actually gaining anything from it. So you want to choose the right atmospheres, association, events, things like that you can go to. If you are after attorneys, you don't want to go to a real estate association function.
Right.
You want to go to a bar association and things like that. So whatever your market is, you want to, again, be intentional and not waste your time if the salespeople and the workers are not going to be your key target. You don't need to go to places that's where the primary people are of those. So, I also spent time in banking, and we put products into banks. And so unless you were the EVP, the president, so executive vice president, the president, or the CEO, you probably weren't going to be able to make a decision about it for me. But going to banking events and meeting other people there, even if those people weren't there, somebody could help introduce me to that person.
That's right. So in any organizational structure, whether it exists as a wiring diagram of the org chart, or everybody's got pretty clear established echelons and you know who reports to who, there is always the formal chain of command, so to speak.
Right.
But then within every echelon, there are those people that essentially punch above their weight class. And like you can figure out, okay, there's actually an informal structure to this organization. I need to try to figure out who can I make that contact with who actually has some outside leverage that can then get me to the person. Because one thing I learned years ago was to never, ever accept no from somebody who didn't have the power to tell me yes.
Yes.
And all too often, you know that ultimately in whatever transactional pursuit you are engaged, that it could end with the CEO or some executive vice president's signature on the document, but you might have to go through 3 or 4 people before you get to that person. And so if one of those people on the way is like, no, we're not interested, you politely and maybe even privately think to yourself, well, you know what? I don't need to hear that from you. I want her to tell me that. If she tells me no, I'm done. But sometimes gatekeepers can stop us in our tracks. And we have to remind ourselves, like, look, that gatekeeper doesn't have the power to sign that document. Her boss's boss does, and I want that lady's audience. And so that's one thing that I figured out along the way, was to make sure that I'm using leverage to get to the person, but ultimately I want to be told no by the decision maker.
Right. But it's also important to make friends with that gatekeeper.
Oh yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. You definitely need to, it sounds, to use the word leverage, it sounds manipulative, but that's the way it works. There are plenty of admin assistants in many corporations that basically, if you don't have that man or woman on your side, you're never getting into that corner office.
Absolutely. So going back to my show, Suits.
You know what? So Suits is now on Netflix.
Yes.
I went and looked it up. I'm intrigued. It's kind of sucked me in a little bit.
It's good, but Donna.
Yes.
If you don't make friends with Donna, you're not getting into Harvey at all. So, and she has a lot of say with him.
Yeah.
So, so you definitely want to befriend everybody up to that point. You don't want anybody who says, who's going to talk against you when you get there.
Oh yeah. No, and again, that comes back to basically things we should have learned in kindergarten, right?
Right.
If you only reserve respect and kindness for the person at the top of the pyramid, and you don't extend that to everybody within that organization, that might work in the short run, but in the long run, you're the type of person that most people ultimately aren't going to want to sustain a business relationship with,
Sure.
right? So I heard somebody once give a keynote address, say, basically, when you walk into a place, treat everybody like they're the CEO.
Yeah.
And eventually you'll have the ear of the CEO.
Right. So that's what, when I was doing these cold calling sales and whatever, the first person I saw was the gatekeeper.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I almost did my pitch directly to them, just like they had the ability to make the decision, knowing they didn't.
Right.
And they went, well, I'm not the decision maker. And I'm like, okay, so who would that be?
Right,
And
right,
they would
right.
tell, I was like, is there any way that you can get me back
Sure,
there?
right,
And,
right.
so, but just becoming friends with them and, and of course you cannot stop at the first time. You've got to keep going back sometimes.
Yeah. So then let me get your insight on that, because I don't know about you, but there will be times recognizing how busy people are that I think, gosh, I sent an email as a follow-up to a pleasant conversation, didn't hear anything back. Oh, do I send another one? Because, I will find myself worrying about coming off as a pest,
Sure.
a nuisance. So how do you handle that? How do you know when you feel like you're getting up to that line where you don't want to go over it?
So for me, I'll send an email, and a lot of times I will, if I'm wanting to get a meeting, I'll send my Calendly link so that they can put it on their calendar. And a lot of times that works. That being said, I know my own self where I can see 100 emails come in and I don't have to deal with that one right now. I go through, and pretty soon that one has gotten buried down so far that I kind of forget. So having another one, you have to figure out what works with people. I will then work to find a way then to text and send something. If they don't answer that, I figure they did get it. They're not interested.
Yeah.
But even then I may follow it. Then I will follow up another time with an email. But, texting is more immediate.
Yeah.
And so you'll see that. And so, and they may just say, hey, I don't have time right now. Will you follow up with me, in a few weeks? But you just never know what's going on. So you cannot just give up after one time. And, in sales, they say it takes at least 7 touches before somebody really grasps who you are and what you're doing. So being consistent, because if you want something, your competitor wants it from them too. But it's really going to be who establishes the relationship and sticks it out the longest. Who's going to get it?
Sure.
That doesn't mean you have to be every day. All right, we're going to meet. Are we going to meet? Are we going to meet?
I think it was a Warner Brothers cartoon. There was the big dog Spike. Then there's a little bitty dog.
Yeah.
Hey, Spike. Hey, Spike. Hey, Spike. Hey, Spike. Hey, Spike. Like bouncing all around him. You
don't want to be that
one.
You don't want to be that one. But, again, a lot of people said, well, were you the bulldog? And I think I've made this reference. And I said, no, I'm kind of like the butterfly that just comes around and land, that you don't mind, because I'm still going to be pleasant and just, hey, just checking in on you and whatever, but you're going to keep noticing me because I'm going to keep coming back. And eventually someone will go, okay, fine, let's sit down and, give me the,
Sure. Yeah.
The squeaky wheel gets the oil.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Well, so something you mentioned, earlier about networking and about, like you said, 5, you typically have some goal. Like, I want to talk to 5 people that will somehow, some way prove mutually beneficial.
Right.
Because you have framed that numerous times that it's not all about Stephanie, right?
Correct.
Right. That there should be a mutual benefit, because if there's not, most people typically aren't going to bend over backwards for a stranger.
Right.
Typically. One of the things that I learned as I stumbled my way through it early on was because I was going to all kinds of networking events, and I just figured, you know what, I'm starting at 0. I've got no traction, no momentum. I'm just going to shotgun blast out in all directions. And to use the analogy, after a while, what I figured out was I was casting into pond after pond after pond, and I had bait that I thought would be attractive to any number of fish, but I'm just kind of casting blind. Then I thought, once upon a time, when I used to scuba dive, in Okinawa, we would go spearfishing, and we had better visibility. We're under the water, and then you see, okay, that is the one fish that I really want to go after. And I'm careful. I don't want people to think that that's the way I approach business. I'm going to spear you.
Right.
But I think you give me some grace here that the analogy is, rather than casting blindly in all directions, I eventually had to figure out, all right, let me go to this pond, put on my mask and snorkel, get beneath the surface, and then try to see who are the 2 or 3 people that I need to really focus my efforts towards.
Sure.
And that has proved to be more beneficial. It doesn't mean that I still don't go to networking events, because, boy, the universe has a sense of humor. It is amazing how cosmic irony works out. And you'll go someplace thinking, do I really want to do this? I might just want to go home. And then I'll like, what the heck, I'll go. And then the most random interaction happens.
Absolutely.
It's really amazing. You kind of got to be out there to
I have
win.
I have a story on that. I went to a networking event, and it wasn't one that I was putting on, somebody put on. And there was this little older gentleman, bow tie suit, sitting in the corner in a chair in the area that we were all congregating. And I thought, well, is he here for networking and not knowing how to come in? And so I went over and I spoke to him and asked if he'd want to join us. And he said, no, I'm actually getting ready to put on a seminar in the other room. I'm just preparing. And I was like, oh, okay. And he goes, well, tell me about this networking. Why would you do that? And so I just kind of explained the basics of, expanding your business circle and things like that. It turned out, and again, this was actually while I was in credit card processing. He was from Boston. His office was the top of this big financial building. He was a financial planner and taught financial planners all over the U.S. for things. And as it turns out, he also sold, those people had to sign up for those classes and pay him. And he said, well, I don't know if I've got enough business for you to even consider it. And he goes, we do about, $500,000 a month. I went, could probably, fit that into my network,
Yeah.
And when I finally got with him and was able to follow up, I got his business, saved him a ton of money because he had signed up years ago. He's in the top of this financial building, and you don't expect a financial planner to be taking credit cards because that's not their general thing. But because of what he did in his classes and things like that, he did.
Okay.
And so nobody was calling on him because nobody knew he would do that. And his rates were, just outrageous. They probably, crept up over the years.
Sure.
And so, but he was one of my largest clients.
Wow.
And, and it was just a small networking event.
Yeah.
But talking to people, you just don't ever know who it's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So, again, to the fishing analogy, like that was one where you had the proverbial line in the water, right?
Yeah.
If one thing we all know about fishing, right, is if your rod and reel is like sitting on the dock without the line in the water, you definitely aren't going to catch anything. So there is something to be said for just always keeping a line in the water, because you just never know what's going to bite. It's just, we need to your earlier points, make sure that, okay, what is my agenda? Like, what am I trying to do here? And that, again, for an introvert, helped me, because now all of a sudden I have somewhat of a codified objective. Like, okay, when I go here today, I want to meet 3 decision makers that could use my services. And then let me go to that host and have them point me in the right direction.
Sure.
Because the first few times I'm like, well, I'll walk in and maybe through my charismatic personality, I'll just attract the whole room to it.
Right.
No, I knew that wasn't going to happen. Yeah.
But so it's whatever you're doing, it's knowing the people that you want that you want to be in front of. If you know a name, I mean, if you're after a specific person, you really want to get in front of them, and that would be your whale, and you just really want, it's knowing that person, asking the people that you meet with, do you know them? Is there a way you could introduce me? Again, the more specific you are, the easier it is.
Yeah.
But, it's having, or it's, I really need, CEOs of this particular type of company.
Yeah.
They tend to be, really gravitate to my services.
Right.
So if you don't have a specific person, having a specific industry or type of industry, that you want to get into will help you get there. Researching on LinkedIn. I've done a lot of that and have gotten in and made some very good connections through LinkedIn. But if nothing else, even if I'm not able to connect with them directly on LinkedIn, I'm able to look and see who the decision makers are in a certain company and can then work to get in there other ways.
Yeah. So something you just mentioned sparked in me, belonging to a business networking international group, or BNI, for those who are familiar with the acronym. We have a real estate agent, and basically at some point in their lives, everybody buys and sells a house,
right?
Or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. She does not stand up every week and say, I'm looking for people interested in buying a house or selling a house. Pretty much every week she'll stand up and she'll say something like, hey, it's back to school season. Some of you have friends or family whose last child is leaving the house, and now they're empty nesters, and they've maybe thought about downsizing, or maybe they live in one county and they've thought about moving counties now that their kids are out of school. Well, suddenly that's much more helpful to me as her advocate, because now that's going to narrow down my universe of 10,000 acquaintances to like, oh shoot, that's right. Our next door neighbor, their last child just went off to college.
Sure.
And so suddenly, it really helps, as opposed to, I mean, she could every week, hey, I just want somebody buying and selling. Like, well, okay. But when you start really
narrowing it down.
Yeah. Very effective. Very effective.
So I definitely recommend that. Again, a lot of times you can find those on LinkedIn, or other social media avenues there. But, if nothing else, you look and see who you may know that is a connection to them, and ask for that introduction. So we are about out of time, but I hope that this will help you in making quality connections. I'm excited about some of our future podcasts coming up.
Yeah, we've got some good ones in the queue.
Yeah, should we share the secret?
No,
we're not gonna say. You're gonna have to just tune
we've
in.
Got some pretty juicy guests in the queue.
Right. Yeah. So we appreciate you listening and participating with us, and hope that you again got something out of it. We appreciate also when you share our podcast and follow us, whether that's on Spotify, Amazon, which is Audible, and we're on YouTube and Apple, and also on Facebook. So we would love you to follow and like any of those, or all of them, even better. And we look forward to seeing you back next week.
See you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.